We might have some real fun with this one. So, Luke, through the first quarter of this year, will you rate my performance, please, in numerical fashion?
1 to 4.
1 to 4. That's the scale. Mm-hmm. You're not even giving me a neutral. We'll save it for the episode.
Magic is found in every room, where people connect over a shared purpose. Luke, Hannah and Chris explore the role of purpose, courage, mindset and culture in every leader's quest for transformational performance.
Welcome to Magic in the Room. I am Hannah Broderud.
And I'm Chris Province.
And I am Luke Freeman, and we are back with our season about how to lead a team. So here at Purpose and Performance Group on Magic in the Room, we are big fans of this idea that you really aren't prepared very well for making this transition from being someone who's an individual contributor who really manages your own work, leads yourself, to leading other people and leading a team. Most of our grades, most of our evaluation, most of the feedback that we get, all growing up and at the beginning of our careers, is around our own deliverables. Are we getting stuff done? Do we do it in a timely way? What's the quality in which we do it? And then all of a sudden, the sick joke happens. The universe pulls the rug out from under us, and someone says, okay, now you're a leader. And guess what? They don't tell you this part. This is why it's hard. Guess what? Now your performance is measured by the work that all these other people do effectively, and not by what you yourself control directly by staying up and grinding through the night to hit a deadline. It's all about what this other group of people do. So this season, we're talking about that. We've talked about the importance of trust and accountability and having shared commitments that we work on together, communication and conflict. And today we are to the snoozeworthy, some would say, exciting, we would counter, topic of performance development.
I mean, who doesn't jump out of bed? Be like, I can't wait to talk about performance.
You know what I want to do today? I'm going to develop the performance of other people.
That's right. Then that's what it's about. I think you nailed it, right? People. And I think the first kind of coming out of the box, the first thing we have to embrace is that we don't hire a technical skill, that we hire a person. Mm-hmm. So I'm not hiring an analyst. I'm not hiring a designer, right? That's the job role. That's the production that a person is responsible for. Mm-hmm. And as a leader, I'm responsible for developing this person, advancing their career, elevating their contribution to our team, therefore our enterprise, and our ongoing success. Like, to continue to grow their responsibilities as they grow in their skills, their interpersonal team skills, their technical skills. Like, that's the idea. So I just want to come out of the chute and say, if we continue to hire technical skills and not people, it's the first obstacle to effective performance development.
Yeah. And so what we mean by performance development then is about ongoing conversations. The conversation is the relationship. And if we're hiring a human being, we need to develop a relationship with that human being. And the way we do that is through these intentionally designed conversations that are intended to align that work and the technical skill and the tasks of that job role with purpose, values, norms, and the business strategy to make sure that we take into account who that human is in that role and helping to align all of the effort towards the same goal.
I'm confused. I thought the way that we developed a meaningful relationship was like once a year giving someone a rating of like 1 to 10.
Yeah, you know what that's called? That's the performance.
That's leadership.
It's the performance reveal. It's much more exciting.
It is. It's a secret.
It's like
for 364 days.
surprise. Here's how you did. And Chris,
Yeah.
you're worth a 2.
I'm a 2. I'm a 2.
You're a 2.
Fantastic.
Now,
Yep.
it's
On a scale of 1 to 4, you're a 2.
it's ultra effective if we have to average out, or we can only give out so many
There's a bell curve.
4s. There's a bell curve, so we can't all be exceptional.
No, not everyone can be
I mean,
a
that's
4,
the hard
Luke.
truth of life. I don't know why you guys are denying that there's winners and losers here.
Yeah. I mean, certainly you could never have a team of exceptional performers. Like a whole team of exceptional performers, that certainly could not happen.
Somebody's going to have to skew that curve.
Yeah. So obviously I'm being facetious, but I think of us as human beings, and this goes back to what you were saying about meaningful relationship with human beings. When I think about like what success looks like, and partly this is what we believe, that what we get up every day to do as a team is develop thriving communities by operationalizing and really clarifying what the shared purpose of that work community is. But to me, that echoes back to where most of our ancestors, that let us built our brains over time, who we are, what we need. I think of that Neolithic farming village, that clan that's together out hunting, gathering, right? The vision is not that there's 3 4s and then 15 3s and then 22s and then just a few 1s. Like if I'm a member and a leader of that farming village or that hunter-gatherer, like my vision for us holistically thriving is that everyone is having a meaningful, fulfilled life. And like, why would we want to settle for anything less now that it's, the 2020s instead of 4,000 years ago? Like, human beings still need the same thing. And leadership is one of them. And leadership into a thriving humanhood, I think, is a part of what our responsibility is as leaders.
Well, and you certainly, like, if I'm responsible for a team, like through performance development, I can coach up or coach out the 1s and 2s, right? Because I want a team of 3s and 4s.
Yeah.
Ideally, like with the right synchronization, even if we don't have the highest level of talent, we can still have the highest level of output, right? Through collaboration, communication, information flow, technical skill development, those other things that I'm responsible for. But the idea, and here's where biases come into play. Like what I see is that as professionals and as enterprise, we're slow to move off of the rating. What I don't hear is someone championing why ratings are good. It's this bias of like, we always want to push back against change.
Yeah, but Chris,
and say why we shouldn't change, but we're not defending why what we're doing is helpful.
yes, but how can you possibly rate someone's performance without giving them a number?
Right?
I don't think that's the argument. I think the argument for numbers is that leaders aren't competent enough to have actual coaching conversations and actually develop performance. Yeah. And so if you have all these people that aren't educated and don't have that competency to actually lead, like, well, what are we going to do? We still got to ship the next order. So, and I'm not going to spend time to invest in you to actually make you a effective human being leader. So next best thing, like, here's this sheet, fill it out for everyone. Here's the parameters.
I have heard leaders actually say those words, though. Like, how are we supposed to know
right
how people are doing if we don't reduce it to a quantitative scale? And there are, and we all have different strengths, right? And I do think for some leaders, that is a difficult competency, the qualitative relationship versus the quantitative. I can apply math to this and I can solve this problem of how people perform.
Right. And as long as you're dealing with strictly technical skills and measurable productivity, you can issue a number. Okay, once you get to applying cognitive function and critical thought to someone's actual contribution, the number goes away. There's no way to do it. It's like a lot of things in life where we try to take something as complex as the human body or as complex as living, and we try to boil it down to such a simple thing. You try to take something so complex and simplify it to a number. And it is, to your point, Luke, like it's in lieu of the skill
Right.
to actually do the thing or have the conversations. We can at least check a box that meets the demands of shareholders, it meets the demands of boards, et cetera, et cetera. But we don't, I've certainly never heard or been around someone that takes an effective stance about why we use rank and file or ratings when we know that it has the effect on the leader of, like, it puts the relationship at risk between the leader and the direct report, because we're issuing some statement of character or value. And we're putting a hard stamp and saying, just like Hannah did to me, she said, your value is a 2. And in some way, she's telling me what I am.
Yeah. And what
Like,
you're worth.
You're issuing me a label and you're assigning me a value. And that puts her and I's relationship, like, it's not helpful for her being my coach. Now she has to be a transactional leader to me.
Yeah.
She can't be my coach. Or she's going to give me that number and be like, everybody gets a 2. Or you had your turn at the 3 last year, now I got to give somebody else a turn at the 3 because I've got to hit the bell curve.
Yeah.
Right? So it's one thing, it's one challenge or one variable that we have one human issuing the value to another human. The other thing is that we add a constraint, a confounding variable, when we say, oh, but your team can't average more than a 2.5. So then you have an artificial constraint, typically because there's money moored to the number, which is a whole other issue, another confounding variable. Like, what are we saying? Like, get rid of the number. If you're going to give everybody a raise, do a COLA and coach people to promote. And if you don't trust your leaders, say so. If you want to learn from best practices, there's a lot of them out there in this arena in small business where they have those one-on-ones every week when the information flows really well because it's a tight team, it's a smaller team. So really our calling in larger organizations is, how do you get the information, the resources, and the money flowing to develop people's competencies, their careers, and ability to promote as they take on more responsibility. Those are the things that are helpful to measure. Those are the things, when we talk about performance development, I think we should be focused on.
Yeah, and I want to give just a little bit more confidence about this. I mean, you mentioned best practice, and I think most people who have kind of grown up in kind of corporate America and are used to the numbers-based rating scales and how performance development works right now, it's just like, well, this is what we do. This is how it happens. But a lot of how this got in vogue was, Jack Welch, GE, right? And they were booming in the late 80s, early 90s, but where is GE today? And so there is this best practice, quote unquote, that was born from this organization that killed it for a time. And I think the research would show, as you go back, and there's some good work on this, a lot of the success financially of GE when it was in its heyday was really around supply chain, government contracting, understanding economies of scale, right? The people practices were never the things that moved them to the next level. I do think there's an argument that people practices and success, there's always some sort of correlation there. But figuring out this magic, we're gonna rate everyone, and anyone that's a 1 or 2, we're either gonna coach up or coach out. Like that approach, it did not lead to sustainability. It did not lead to sustained shareholder value. It led to a boom bust cycle, which I think is not what we want as leaders. And then Chris, to your point about modeling off small business. I do think it's a interesting thought experiment if you're an enterprise leader to think about, how does my mission become for all my director levels, senior managers? How do I turn them into GMs of business units that are highly skilled, that they are running a small business and they're understanding the totality of their business and the larger context that it sits in, and they have the type of leadership acumen that it takes to have real positive and coaching relationships with their teams.
We think about performance evaluation, traditional notions of performance management, and I think where we're trying to move things towards today is performance development. And this idea that it's year round and it's consistent and it's intentionally designed and it's conversational and it's about alignment, about our purpose and our goals. It's these spaces where we talk about really that strategic framework, that brand promise, right? It's these conversations where our business can really come to life, but there's different types of conversations. So Hannah, you kind of want to break that down. When we think about performance development, how does it fit into the other things that we use, the other communication techniques or the other people practices that we use to really create a vibrant and sustainable brand?
Yeah, I think of performance development in kind of this holistic context where the development is really what gives momentum and direction to the work and to our energy and our efforts. And we use this analogy of a river sometimes where, development is ongoing, it's ever flowing, it's got momentum. And as a river, it kind of meanders a little bit, right? So you have banks of the river that keep that momentum and the direction flowing where it needs to go. And so we think about, other elements of this, which one of the banks of the river is corrective action. If we are veering off course and there are behavior, attitudes, just maybe gaps that need to be filled or corrected, that's a separate type of conversation, right? But that's more of the exception. The ongoing performance development conversation are those one-on-ones, those regular check-ins, right? And then there's development plans. In some organizations, we do those on a quarterly basis, and everybody participates, right, in having an active role in thinking about my own development, working collaboratively with my leader on how I want to and how I can develop in the direction that will both support the strategy or support my goals, or both. And then there's coaching as a skill, right, that we use throughout these types of conversations. And it can be small, informal coaching interactions in the moment. They can be more formal conversations, sometimes with an external coach, sometimes with the person I work with, that I report to.
Well, and I think that idea that the people leader is coach and the follower is coachee, right? And that relationship between leader and direct report, it is the coaching practice that accelerates or multiplies that development.
Yeah.
Right? It's not a management practice.
Right.
Manage tasks, we develop people. The management of someone's task doesn't necessarily help them in their career. It doesn't necessarily help them get better. It just keeps us on track. Yeah. And management is certainly necessary. It's required. But when it comes to development, Luke, kind of riddle me this. If I'm going to have an effective development relationship with you, leader to direct report, do we need to talk about anything else other than, do you help advance our company's mission or our purpose? Do you build healthy relationships that help our team get work done? And are you getting technically better at your job?
I mean, I think that pretty much covers it. Yeah, we overcomplicate this with these scales, and we're going to rate someone on 20 things. And I mean, the fact is, all of the individual folks doing their jobs, they know what's required to do those jobs at a technical level and the day in, day out responsibilities.
Well, at what point though, do I just say, Luke, tell me where you want to go? Right? Am I trying to manage you somewhere, or do I need to release your career to you? Like, if I'm senior in this relationship, I should have the resources, I should have the knowledge and the experience. I've been where you've been, or somewhere similar. So at what point, or maybe it's a question of, how do I go from fully responsible of dragging you where I want you to go, to giving you agency over your own career and saying, I'm here to help, and here's some ideas on, in lieu of you not having an idea of where you want to go, let's go this way until you identify something different.
Yeah, I think it depends. I go back to situational leadership, which that whole theory, if you want to look it up, situational leadership model, it's this idea that there's a few different quadrants that your leadership style can fit into based on the technical skill and the kind of agency and experience of the person that you're leading. So it can be directive if someone doesn't have the information that they need and they really need some hands-on, hey, go do this next. But then it moves all the way to exactly what you're saying. Like, what resources do you need? Like, where do you think we should go next? How do I support you as you go there? And I think we have to have the wisdom to discern which of those styles we're shifting into. I think all of it can be coaching. All of it can be based on inquiry and curiosity. Hey, what do you think went well in that yesterday? What didn't go well? How can we do that better? What ideas do you have? But yeah, I do think sometimes we have to take the reins and say, hey, I really think this next month, I would love you to read this article and let's get back and talk about it. Or I would really like you to try this different approach with the next customer that comes in. And then let's talk about how that goes. So, we have to have the discernment to know. But I think that just underscores the point. Like, a form that has the 20 things on it, like, it doesn't help you as a leader know where on the spectrum you need to engage with those individuals.
Well, and this all goes back to what we started with, right? It's developing a relationship with a real human being, understanding that person. And, I think being able to, quote unquote, motivate someone is a misnomer. Motivation is intrinsic. Everybody's motivated for something. And finding what that is and connecting to that, I think we can inspire people. We can help them connect with their motivation, but I don't think we can motivate. And so agency is a big factor in motivation, right? I can have some impact on my circumstances and on my career, and I can make a difference. I can do things. I have an internal locus of control where I feel like I can make choices that are going to make a difference in my life and the life of other people. And I think leaders can help foster that, right? Or not. And we've seen the opposite of that. I wanted to bring up one other element here of this kind of holistic performance management. So we talked about performance development, which is this ongoing, continuing, different types of conversations, right? Corrective action, things like progressive discipline, performance improvement plans. Those are kind of on the one bank when we have to make corrections. The other bank of that development river really is around recognition. And I think that's an integral part of performance development. And meaningful recognition can mean a lot of different things. We'll have a whole episode just on that. But I do think it's worth mentioning when we talk about motivation and helping people connect with what they do best, right? The research shows that when we pay positive attention to what people do well, that's the biggest predictor of the motivation to want to do more of that. And so leaders being able to recognize positive performance, whether that's in individual one-on-one conversations or in more formal recognition programs. I think that's a big part of developing performance.
Yeah, so without jumping, that's one of my favorite rabbit holes. But like full wraparound, like that's really what we're talking about. Is performance is a wraparound of corrective action, having command of our progressive discipline, accepting my role as coach, knowing what behaviors are acceptable and not acceptable on the team, having appropriate confidence to execute the processes. And so there's a technical component of what recognition programs are available here at this enterprise. What is the corrective action process here, your progressive discipline? How do I leverage that? And then what are the explicit or intentional cadences that I carry with my direct reports and the team that I'm responsible for leading to ensure that we are continuing to grow and develop and move forward? As an analogy, the analogy I like to use is we should be establishing our strategic framework as a perimeter to access our organization. If you are a candidate for a job, how we interview, how we call and set up the interview, your understanding of our interview process is one of the first touch points of how you interpret our character. But it's what we believe, it's our values, it's our promise from our brand, it's our vision as an enterprise that really should establish a perimeter that determines who gets in. And it's like, if you have a propensity to believe what we believe is important about our business, then please come join. Come be a part of this work community that's trying to do something meaningful. If you do not have a propensity to believe like we believe, we're going to send you all the signals to please eject, and hopefully ask the right questions and do the right assessments to eject the people that do not have that propensity or cannot contribute in a meaningful way. So now, for those people that indicate they believe why we're in business and the products or services we deliver, now they're part of the team, they're part of the community. And this idea, like what you talked about, Hannah, to have, corrective action on one bank, recognition on the other bank as the river flows is development. I kind of look at, once someone is inside that perimeter, once they're a part of our community, we have two tools at our disposal. We have a spotlight and a shovel, right? The spotlight I use when I see something really good, I want to say, hey, everybody see that? Right? Like, we love this. Look at this person's character and how they elevate our values, how they extend our reputation. This is exactly what we're about. And on the flip side, I've got the shovel in my left hand. And that is for behaviors, not people. It's to remove behaviors that are unacceptable or work against what we believe. Right? They don't advance our values. It works against what we believe. It's not helpful in terms of advancing our community. So I've got to use my shovel to get rid of the behaviors, and I've got to use my spotlight to elevate the people that advance our brand. So it's just kind of another analog or an analogy to think about how we leverage these functions once we're part of the same community.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I want to reflect back on our last episode too, which was conflict. And we talked about leaders' roles in producing conflict sometimes to be able to move something forward even when it's not comfortable. And I think that performance development can be a time that we do need to introduce some conflict and some pressure into the lives of our team. And again, it goes back to what you're saying, Hannah, about really understanding how each person is motivated. But oftentimes, like really understanding where to apply that pressure in a positive way for their own good and the good of the organization, I do think is a factor in this. And sometimes when we talk about, hey, let's not number people, it comes across as really soft, but that's not the intent, right? The intent is when we introduce pressure, that it is pressure that's moving down that river of performance development and saying, let's focus here, let's grow here. What are your thoughts on how we can do that best? Here's some insight for me. We're going to continue to check in on this. This
Yeah.
is not a once a year and done conversation.
Well, and I think with that, just another lens that we can take to look at performance development versus maybe some of the more traditional ways of performance. We were making fun of the performance reveal, right? The performance evaluation or review. It's supposed to be a review, the annual review, but it becomes this surprise because that's the one time we had a conversation. And so I think the difference between performance development is that it's proactive, it's coactive, meaning there's participation both from the team member and from the leader. We both play a part in it, right? We both have some ownership in that process. And it's focused on the future. And it's helping people reflect on their own performance rather than just being directive and saying, here's what you need to do, right? It instills agency because it invites reflection. And that's where that coaching practice and that practice of asking questions that provoke thought really comes in, right?
Yeah, and I think and specifically like in doing turnaround work, there's not a lot of underperforming companies that have a practice of leaders and direct reports meeting for one-on-ones every week.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like that is not a low performance behavior. That is a high performance behavior.
Yep.
The low performance statement is like, well, I've got so much work to do. I've got meetings, I've got emails, I've got reports I need to send up the chain. And like at the end of the
Or
day,
at this level, we don't do one-on-ones at this level.
Right.
Whatever level you decide that the cutoff is, right? We don't do that at this level because, I don't know, maybe we assumed we don't need to develop when we get to a certain level.
true story. I was talking about one-on-ones to a group. It was like a lunch and learn. And I finished talking about the importance of one-on-ones and effective leadership. And this lady comes up to me afterwards and she's like, I just want to let you know, that was great. I mean, I've been here 28 years. This doesn't apply to me, but I really enjoyed what you had to say.
Yeah, for all those other people.
Yeah. For everybody else, this sounds like a hell of an idea. I'm like, oh boy. Right?
Yeah.
But you've been there too.
Yeah.
You've met her.
Yeah.
Okay. It is, if we are not talking to our people, what are we doing? What are we doing? The only people that cannot talk to their people are in high transaction, highly measurable, production tied to pay, quantitative type work. Effectively, I'm saying if you are in manufacturing and it is high technical reliance, you might be able to flow information less efficiently and still perform. But if the work that you do has any sort of relational function or cognitive application, if you have to think a little bit to do it, you probably need to have a relationship with the person doing the work. And this is where what businesses do and what science knows really diverge.
Yeah.
We have a big gap between what we know is helpful from organizational design and what we know produces low performance that every leader complains about in the enterprises that we work with. And like closing that gap, it is possible. It's just making the commitment to say, I'm hiring a person, not a skill.
Yeah. Developing performance, just like developing a relationship, it takes proactivity rather than reactivity. We talked about reactivity in our episode on conflict and how emotional reactivity is what often causes personal conflict that can that can be detrimental to a team's performance and also to a relationship. And so I think if we reframe how we think about this whole performance management thing, it's not about being reactive to things that happened or things that have happened in the past. It's about developing the relationship, looking towards the future, helping people connect with what they're great at, what their strengths are, where their talents lie, and in that, helping to connect with internal motivation to want to move towards that.
Yeah. Luke, I'm going to ask like an explicit ask. Man, I really like what you're saying about like holistic performance management, performance development, tying into recognition and having command of corrective action. Like, I love it. I don't know how to get my enterprise bought into it. Can you give me some ammo? Give me an elevator pitch. Give me some way to get my company off high center and start listening to the science and less to our emotion.
What is the biggest problem that you're facing? Right. That would be my question back. What is the biggest problem that you're facing right now? And tell me how developing people, let's say meeting with them weekly, biweekly, and one-on-ones, and focusing the entire workforce around how do we all figure out how to solve this problem together. Tell me how that doesn't pay for itself in 6 months. Like, there's no better use of time. And the problem would be solved if we had the discipline to do that. And we had leaders that were capable of doing that.
Okay, now, how important is it or how interdependent are these things, this idea of communications framework and performance development? Because those feedback loops are what I'm thinking about. Like in that one-on-one, we're getting feedback and we're issuing information or we're providing resource or money or something. But your feedback loops are one-on-one. They're team level insights. They're organization-wide insights. How does that start to dance?
Yeah, I mean, work is complex. And if we're not dedicating time to communicating and everyone being on the same page, we're going to have rework happening. We're going to have competing projects happening. And so this really, one-on-ones and performance development, it really does dovetail into what are our meeting cadences and how are we making sure that information is shared effectively across the organization. That doesn't mean meetings all day, every day, but it does mean not depending on cascade effect, right? Well, I'm going to tell my direct reports, then they're going to tell theirs, and then they're going to tell theirs. Well, Johnny's sick and Susie doesn't do a staff meeting but once every 2 months, and so-and-so is a really bad communicator, and all of a sudden your organization, only 40% of your team members get the key messages. Like,
and by the way, it was just in an email. And
right.
My inbox was buried.
Right.
I didn't see the email.
Yeah, there you have to take not knowing our direction and our priorities off the table. And I think one-on-ones is a really effective part of that. It's also an accountability exercise. So if we say this is how we do performance development here, everyone's got a development plan, they're checking in with their leader at least every 2 weeks and working on their work, their day-to-day work, solving problems, clearing roadblocks. They're going to talk about their development plans at least every month. Everyone hear me? That's our expectation. You tell me if your leader doesn't do that for you. Like, that's accountability to actually keep the organization aligned and moving forward. So I'll go back to sparking some conflict as a leader. Like, we have to ensure that our vision gets executed, and this is one way to do it. And we should be pressuring those team leader level folks to be growing as leaders. If we have people that are like, "Ooh, I can't do one-on-ones. I hate doing that. I'm uncomfortable with that."
Or I'm too busy for them.
I'm too busy for that. I don't know how to help someone set goals for their career. Like, we got to put some pressure on, because that leader is undeveloped and they need to figure out how to develop, or we need to support them.
That means if that leader reports to us, then we have to do that performance development with that individual.
Yeah. And that's where it breaks down ultimately, right? That's where we see over and over, like senior leaders, if they're not willing to hold themselves accountable, it's very difficult to hold the organization accountable. Can I make one more point that is really important that we haven't talked about yet with performance development? We've talked about ratings, and we're hijacking people's emotions when we assign a number, and it shouldn't be a surprise once a year. Another huge Achilles heel to that once a year performance review is tying it to compensation. So if this is determining my level of salary adjustment or my bonus for the year or whatever else, do I care about anything else? Am I open to hearing feedback about how I can do better? If my motivation is like, well, I guess I got to do these 3 things so I can get a point higher next year and get that extra dollar figure, that's not helpful. So when we take it out of the once a year context and say performance development is something that happens consistently, we have a coaching culture around moving forward, it separates out the performance or the compensation decisions and strategy of the organization from individual, what are my goals right now conversation. And people are open to it then, right? They're open to advancement and learning and goal setting in a way that isn't like, hey, we're talking about your goals. I'm dangling a carrot right out here in front of you. But guess what? I've got a really big stick right behind me that I'm going to pull out when you're least expecting it and whack you across the nose with it. No, like we got to go throw the stick in the shredder for a while. That's what corrective action is for. It's not what evaluation and performance conversation is for. Corrective action is for getting rid of behaviors that don't align.
Yeah. And by the way, none of those things are motivating, right? Back to what science knows about human motivation and human behavior and what business does. There's a big gap there. Because like assigning a number, Luke, you alluded to, kind of triggering people's emotions. You assign somebody a 2 who maybe sees themselves as a high performer. There's nothing more demotivating than that, right?
What do I know? I'm just a 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've seen it. It's like, it can be devastating to somebody who's like, I've never gotten a C on anything in my life. Like I'm an A student and you're giving me a C. Like this is not fair. This is not right. I don't understand. And that person's motivation is just done.
Well, it just doesn't work when we try to slam corrective action, development, and recognition into one document. And create all the stress for every people leader. Here's 12 areas of performance where you're supposed to apply all 3 of these disciplines once a year. We ratchet up the anxiety. Everyone hates the process. If I'm on the receiving end, like I know there's a number in there, just let me flip to it and then I can stop listening. And you can talk for an hour and I don't have to hear a word. That is the process. Now, I'm waiting for someone to step up and tell me why that's helpful, or like really protect and champion this really painful process. So until someone can effectively do that, then I think we should look for a better way.
Okay, I got a use case for you. You have a holding. You own a company that's in a structurally declining market, and your goal is to extract as much value out of it in the next 10 years while that market declines as possible. That would be a use case. Every manager doesn't have to be a good leader. They spend an hour a year on people leadership, and the rest is just squeezing whatever drops are left in this sponge before the market completely erodes, right? You could make a case for that.
Yeah, and I know
it's a yellow book company.
But getting into that space, I'm going to pay as much as I possibly can for the people doing the work.
Yeah.
Right?
And everybody that works there hates working there too, by the way. So I got to pay them even more to make up for that.
Well, I applied at a Fortune 500 company one time whose website said, "You'll love your paychecks."
Well,
You know? Like,
At least they're saying it.
at least they're saying
This is
it.
the value proposition for working here. You will have a miserable 8 hours a day,
yeah.
but we will compensate you for it because
Well,
we
and-
don't know how to do it different.
And let's be clear though, when the only reason someone works for you is a paycheck, you are only as good as the next offer.
Yeah.
And as soon as a better offer comes along, they're out.
Yeah. And so that's really the whole point. That's why this is all important. Let's get this thing sung out. What are your parting thoughts here, Luke?
Yeah. Parting thoughts. If this makes you uncomfortable, and it does me sometimes when I think about my leadership responsibility, take that as a challenge to grow. I mean, I know I've had times where I'm like, okay, I'm going into this next one-on-one and we've met and this person doesn't seem receptive to coaching and they have a hard time articulating their goals. I don't know what to do. Like I have to, then it's on me. How do I get more creative? How do I go get the coaching I need to learn how to take a different approach with the person? Approach it that way. And it is hard. But don't just use sometimes what seems like a lack of excitement from the team member as a out to not do the performance development work. At least invite them regularly into the performance development, career development conversation.
Yeah. And I'm just going to say the easiest way to start is accept that we're hiring a person who we're now responsible for stewarding. Okay. I think traditional views of leadership run amok of this idea of respect, that I'm hiring a technical skill to serve me, our team, or this company, instead of I'm hiring a person who I get to, or I'm fortunate enough to work with, steward their development, and hopefully contribute to them having a successful career, a better family life, a healthier existence that contributes in a meaningful way to our community. So, I mean, it's that mindset and approach and the respect that goes along with that. I want to steward that relationship and their development because I respect them as a person. Yeah. So that's kind of my final out. And what are your thoughts? And then,
Yeah, bringing it back to, that's where it started, right? We're hiring a human being. And as a human being, it's all in the relationship, right? Building a relationship with a human being that's part of our team. And the conversation is the relationship. When we are not having conversations, we don't have a relationship. It's as simple as it gets. And the higher quality those conversations are, the higher quality is that of that relationship. So it's my final thought. If any of the things that we talked about today resonate with you or you want to learn more, reach out to us. You can connect with us at purposeandperformancegroup.com. As a reminder, you can download a guide to this episode and the other episodes in this season at magicintheroom.com. You can find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. And Magic in the Room is hosted by Chris Provins, Hannah Broadrood, and Luke Freeman. It is produced by Ben West. Social media management is by Emma Holland and Maggie King Robinson. Our theme music is by Evan Grimm. You can find his music on Apple Music. This episode was recorded on site in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Yeehaw.
Magic in the Room is a production of Purpose and Performance Group. You can find us at purposeandperformancegroup.com and previous episodes of this podcast at magicintheroom.com.